In yet another entry in the James Freeman is retarded category, we have this. I don't know why I watched it. Uh, I thought I was going to get to see two cops fighting. That was what was promised. That was not what was delivered. I think this was from the Utah incident where the cop was trying to demand that the nurse draw a driver's blood who was unconscious without a warrant. Anyway, this picture has nothing to do with anything in the video. Nor does my magical badge has more powers than yours. This also has absolutely nothing to do with anything in the video. It's just James Freeman trying to play the propaganda game ineffectively as usual. It seems like James Freeman can only convince the people who already believe that the police are tyrants He doesn't even try. He just says that the police are a criminal terrorist organization, does nothing to prove it, just states it as though it were a well-known fact. And most people rightfully think that that's nonsense, it's retarded. Like if it moves, cops will shoot it. Well, yeah, except for the fact that most people don't see cops shooting anybody. Typically, I see a few cops a day driving to and from work, on the streets, driving around. At the local grocery store has a Pete's Coffee in it. A lot of times I'll see CHP officers sitting in there waiting for their shift to begin or whatever. I see sheriff's deputies going in there. I mean, it's a pretty popular spot for the cop crowd. And surprisingly, they don't just start murdering everybody in sight. So, yeah, typical stupid shit. Badges, by the way, just so we cover it, badges aren't magical and badges don't have power. Badges are symbols of authority. The actual power of an officer isn't derived from the badge, it's derived from the grant of authority from the state or the city or the federal government. That's where the power comes from. The badge is a costume prop. It is there just to show people, to give people a quick reference point as to who the person is and what their official powers are. Just like a police uniform. It's just part of the uniform. It's not a magic badge. And only 2-year-olds think in those terms. So let's go to the video. Well, this is as good a point as any. These 4 people, James is talking about them being sued. There was a riot. I don't know where in here, but you can see pictures of people dancing on the hoods of cop cars, which is a crime. Somewhere in here, somewhere. Here you go. People jumping up and down on what appears to be a cop car hood. That is a crime. That is vandalizing public property in some form or another. You can't just destroy government property. That is a crime. So we have documented evidence of people committing crimes in this particular protest against an officer who was acquitted. Now, just so that we're clear, an officer being acquitted means that the government investigated, found there to be probable cause. The government put a trial on. The government took him to trial, and the people, i.e. the jury, found him to be not guilty. So, blame the people, don't blame the government. But these people were out there protesting and some were rioting, and these 4 people were cops, and they were bad cops, and they wanted to go out there and crack some skulls because, I don't know, just like James can get overzealous, I suppose cops can get overzealous too. The trick is to know the percentages of cops and what the government does about cops. Well, these 4 cops are being sued because there was an undercover officer in the crowd who these 4 cops found and beat unnecessarily, unreasonably. He was told to get on his knees. He was getting on his knees with his hands up, and they tackled him and they proceeded to beat the shit out of him. And so they're suing him. James plays a clip, and in the clip, it talks about them being indicted. These 4 cops are indicted, but see, he's talking about a federal civil rights lawsuit. But these 4 cops were indicted. They were indicted for civil rights violations and obstruction of justice. The indictment charges officers Daniel Boone, Bailey Coletta, Randy Hayes, and Christopher Myers with various felony charges, including deprivation of constitutional rights, conspiracy to obstruct justice, destruction of evidence, and obstruction of justice. These are very serious charges, and the vigorous enforcement of civil rights is essential to maintaining public trust in law enforcement, said U.S. Attorney Jeff Jensen. The St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department, or Municipal Police Department, something along those lines, the police department recognized the importance of this investigation, and its leadership has cooperated at every turn. I continue to have great confidence in the brave and honorable men and women of the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department, Chief John Hayden, and Public Safety Director Judge Jimmy Edwards. I wish to commend SLMPD leadership for its cooperation and the support of this investigation. Law enforcement and the public have a common interest in identifying and holding accountable those who dishonor the badge, said Special Agent in Charge Richard Quinn of the FBI St. Louis Division. To that end, I am encouraging people to contact the FBI if you're a witness in this case. So, in this, so far, we have 4 bad cops who, number 1, have been charged by the federal government, assisted in the investigation by the St. Louis Police Department, who are also now getting sued. What magical powers are these badges supposed to grant? That's the question that you should be asking. And then this officer here, it was an off-duty police officer. There was a shootout. The St. Louis police were following a stolen car, chasing a stolen car. There were 3 suspects inside of it. The suspects and the officers exchanged gunfire. The suspects abandoned the car and fled on foot. This officer was in his front yard. Suspects ran by. This officer pulled his gun. The other guy pulled his gun. This officer told the guy to drop his gun or whatever. Other cops rolled up, saw this guy who was out of uniform with a gun drawn. They were chasing armed men who I'm presuming were black, because one of the officers. So this guy identified himself as an officer, put down his weapon. The other cops identified him positively as an officer, returned his weapon. Another cop turned the corner, who happened to be white, just full disclosure, sees this guy holding a gun, says drop the weapon, and shoots. That's the allegation. Doesn't give this guy time to drop the weapon. This guy had already been identified, etc. Now, this guy was the interim chief. He gave a conflicting version of what happened at the time. So this was from 2017. This is the night of. This guy right here is the new police chief. This dark guy in the background is the new police chief. And he did give an interview on it, which I watched. Whoops. He says basically that he doesn't know if it's a disciplinary action that's needed on the part of the officer who shot, or if there's a training, if it's a lack of training. This was from fairly early on, so maybe he's changed his idea now. And he also doesn't know exactly. He says he knew at the time that this officer, this interim chief, was giving his speech or his briefing, that this guy knew that the officer who shot Milton Green was white. But that doesn't mean that the officer shot him because he was black. The officer mistook him for a suspect. Presumably the suspect was black. And the allegation is that, white guys can't tell black guys apart or something. However, this guy's no longer the police chief. The guy behind him is now the police chief. And the officer who shot Mr. Green is being sued and investigated by the new police chief to determine whether or not there needs to be disciplinary action. So again, badges don't grant extra rights. But here's really my issue with this situation. Is Milton Green a hero, a victim, or a police officer? Because he is a police officer. The undercover guy who was assaulted and beaten by these 4 cops was also a cop. Are cops all bad? Or are cops sometimes the good guys if they're the victims of other cops? Now, James goes on to suggest, Milton Green says in here that he, or at least the narrator, gal, says that he joined the police force to I didn't mean to do that. Somewhere in there. Ooh, I know what I could do. I could do this, and I could do open transcript. And he says in here somewhere that he joined the police force to make a difference. Here we go. He became an officer to support his family and to make a difference in the community. And then James turns it into he joined a terrorist organization. Do you still think we should join the police department and change it from the inside? That's not what this guy was trying to do. This guy saw an issue in his community, and he joined the police to be a part of the solution to that issue in his community. Unfortunately, he got shot during an issue with his community. Because remember, it wasn't the police who stole the car, and the police were probably justified in returning gunfire with the 3 suspects. So it stands to reason that the police weren't initiating the problem. Now, did the officer who shot Milton Green make a poor choice? Obviously. Is he being punished for it? Apparently, he's getting sued. But a lot of this stuff is standard. I mean, when you file a suit, here's what I'm going to assume happened. Milton Green and the city were engaged in settlement negotiations. They were trying to reach a resolution outside of court. It would save Milton Green attorney's fees, and it would save the city attorney's fees. They were unable to come to a resolution. Milton Green wanted more than the city thinks that the city will have to pay if it goes to trial, and Milton Green thinks that he could get more if he went to trial. So that is why now, at this point, his attorney is filing suit. And of course, his attorney is going to allege all the worst possible things, because that is what you do. You paint the picture in the best possible way for your client. Now, we're getting the allegations of the victim. The city is going to have a completely different side of the story. Their attorneys are going to present a completely different interpretation of the facts. And so it doesn't really make much sense to jump on the propaganda train at this point, because we won't know until this goes through the system, and it might get settled, or it might actually go all the way to trial and a jury verdict. But it doesn't make sense just to rely on the word of a police officer, because that's what the allegation is. It's the word of a police officer, if you think that police officers are all liars. So it's just it's a muddied propaganda. You've got police officers as both the heroes, the victims, and the perpetrators. It doesn't make any good narrative sense. So I hope that helps. I hope that maybe if you thought that there might be something wrong with James's storytelling, maybe I helped you put a bit of a finger on it. And if I didn't, well, that's just too bad. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.